Hello and welcome to the Board Game Barbecue episode 329, brought to you by Advent Games, More Than Meeples, and our lovely patrons. You've got Connor here in one of the hosting chairs, and I've got a very exciting episode coming your way today. But before I'm going to use this person's term of burying the lead, before we bury the lead, I'd like to introduce my other co-host from the barbecue, Lauren. How you going, Loz?
I'm very good. It's a Saturday morning. I'm hopped up on coffee. I'm feeling keen and ready to go and chat about some games.
Yeah, me too. And we have a very special guest today. He is actually Australian, but he's coming to us from the United States. He has one of our favorite games. He has made one of our favorite games of last year in Things in Rings. It is Peter C Hayward. How are you going, Peter? What's news?
Very well. I'm nervous that I've been here for 10 years. So I'm nervous that my Australian accent has dulled and you're going to listen and be like, this guy's not Australian. Not really.
Not at all. Like I was like, oh no, you've just moved over there yesterday. Yeah.
I think with contact effects, what we're going to see is it starts off mild and then towards the end of the podcast, fair dinkum, how we go.
Yeah.
G'day, mate. How you doing? All right?
So
my girlfriend's least favorite thing is when I say that. It just like grates her nerves. G'day, mate. How you doing? All right?
Not to make this about me, because this show's definitely about you, Peter, but I lived in the States for 2 years.
Nice,
so I lived in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Wasn't my choice.
The number one place that Australians move to, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
We actually don't call it Kentucky. We call it Little Australia over here. It's mostly Australians at this point.
And so he was over there because he was in the army. And anyway, long story short, we would all have a meetup. All the Australians would meet up on Anzac Day in Washington, D.C. And that's what would happen. It was like you would hear, then all of a sudden you would just get that contact effect, as you're saying, Lauren. Like you would start to, especially as kids, because I think kids lose the accent a lot quicker. And then all of a sudden they're like, no, you're back to normal. You're back to
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, you sound Aussie as
I sound Oka.
Oka. But yeah, so like I said before, look, I mentioned Things and Rings with Peter. You have, as you pointed out on your wall that we might be able to get in the snip later, 23 published games, which is amazing. It's incredible. Lauren's giving her a little silent clap there.
A little respectable golf clap, yeah.
The perfect response for a podcast,
yeah. Can you please tell us about your journey into gaming and game design?
Okay, this is going to sound very strange because I'm a straight man, but I got into board games to impress a boy. There was a YouTuber who I was just a huge fan of, and I used to live in Melbourne, and I used to run these live comedy shows, and because I was such a fan of this YouTuber, I invited him onto my show. He's not around anymore, so I won't name him, but I invited him on my show. He had a great time. I got all starstruck, and he was like, yeah, I'm playing board games this weekend. Do you like board games? I was like, of course I like board games. I love board games. Yes, love them, all about them. So my first foray was a 8-hour game of Twilight Imperium.
Oh my God.
Which I won. And so from then I had the bug. So I have that rare disease where I can't consume anything without also wanting to create it. So if I listen to podcasts, I want to make a podcast. If I read books, I want to write a book. If I'm watching a movie, I want to make movies. Once I started playing board games, I immediately started designing them. So Galaxy Trucker by Vlaada Chvátil, my favorite designer, was the game that just blew me away in its structure and its elegance and its combination of rules. And I was just like, I want to make this. That was the game that really made me go, this is what I want to do. My long-term goal has always been making movies. That's what I want to do with my life. That's what I want on my obituary. And to do that, I discovered from living in Australia, you can't really do that in Australia. We make two shows every 8 years. It's not really a viable career. I have friends who made TV shows and also had full-time day jobs. And I was like, oh boy, that doesn't bode well for that being what you want to do. So I want to make movies and TV. And to get into America, I don't know if you know this, if your dad's not in the army and going to Kentucky is very, very difficult. And so I don't have a college degree. I didn't want to marry an American just for the sake of getting a visa. But there is a visa, and it's got the most wonderful name. I don't know if you've heard of it. The Alien of Extraordinary Ability.
That's what we funnily call Adrian as well, actually. Yeah.
Unrelated, though.
Yeah.
So I spent 9 years working towards the Alien of Extraordinary Ability visa, or 7, 8 years, whatever it was, for board games, because there's a list of 9 requirements. You need to fulfill 5 of them. And I realized that board games was a thing where I could be on panels and I could win awards and I could this and that, which sounds very cocky. But after 8 years, I got it. So I'm now a permanent resident in the US on my way to citizenship, thanks to board games. So I have the most Rube Goldberg path to board games, which is I liked YouTube and wanted to make a movie. And so in between there is a full career in board games.
I totally get the wanting to impress someone by making stuff up. Like I've done stuff like started drinking tea and, purchased movies that I've never watched just so they can be on the wall when people come out of my house. So I totally get that.
I have a distinct memory of being kind of 9 years old and being invited over to a friend's house. I just moved to Sydney from Perth, and she asked if I wanted tea, and I was sipping that thing, gagging as a 9-year-old. I will finish this.
Yeah, determined. When I was a kid, we only ever had tea when we went camping, and we'd make it in a billy, which Australians should know what that is. But for any international listeners, it's a tin can that you hang over a fire to boil water. And that was the only time I had tea when I was a kid, when we were camping. So I thought that's what billies tasted like. Like that for me was the taste of a billy. I thought that it infused it with this like, I don't think tea tastes like tin, but in my mind, tea has a kind of tinny taste because of that's the association.
That's so fair. I do want to ask about this journey though, because that is fascinating. Twilight Imperium.
That's not the answer you always get.
That's a lot of front loading of rules and experience. How did that first experience go?
I have a systems brain. It actually gets awkward. I listeners don't know this. I have a distinctive blue beard, and in America, I have a distinctive Australian accent. To you guys, you're like, Peter, everyone has an Australian accent. That's not distinctive at all. I'm going to blow your mind. That's not always the case. So when people meet me, they're like, oh, yes, the Australian with a blue beard. They remember me, 90% of the time. I'm pretty memorable. I meet 1,000 people a year at board game conventions, and I don't remember them. But I've discovered that if they can tell me what game we played together, especially if it's a prototype, I'll be like, yes, of course. Yes, Samantha with the mum from whatever. Like I can nail down exactly who someone is from the game we play. So I think of it as a systems brain. So you're asking like, how did I deal with the intricate systems of Twilight Imperium? I just opened a drawer in my brain and they fit in perfectly, and I was able to play and win. And in fact, I exploited the game. Can I dive deep into Twilight Imperium?
Of course you can.
Please, go for it.
Is that appropriate on a board gaming podcast? So this is Twilight Imperium version 3, and this was before the expansions or the expansions we weren't playing with. And one of the, what are they called? The main cards that you get, the strategy cards. One of the strategy cards, it's such bad design. It's just get 2 victory points. And if you know Twilight Imperium, you get 10 victory points to win. So if you are the first in line, you just have to take that. It's a mandatory pick. You're like, I'm going to take the one that gets me 2 victory points every time because and so the game becomes, firstly, get first priority. Secondly, take that one. And that's how it kind of moves forward to victory. They changed that immediately. Like the expansion fixed it, and then Twilight Imperium 4 doesn't have that mechanic. It's just, I just don't think it's a super appealing mechanic. It's very scripted. I had an action card, whatever they're called, the action card things. That was keep your strategy card between 2 rounds. So I was like, I will hold on to this until I get the 2-point one, and then I will play it. I don't think it was literally keep it, but it was like something that allowed you to manipulate the system to keep it and get extra 2 victory points. And so that's how I won. So the boring answer is the rules fit my brain, and I learn probably, because I play mostly prototypes, I learn 300 to 700 new games a year. And even if I'm playing the same game week after week, I'm learning it each time because, there'll be rule changes between them. And they just slot in, no issues. My brain is just built for board game rules, which is very handy.
Well, that's good because mine's definitely not. In fact, I don't even think my brain's built for me, like, to be perfectly honest.
My party trick is that, so I have friends who host a monthly game night, monthly game day. So it's about 40 of us get together in their lovely big house.
Lovely.
And we all bring games and we all play games from like 11 in the morning until 2 a.m. Wonderful time. And my party trick is that the host will sit down and learn the games he wants to teach. And you can hand me a game that I've never seen before, and within 5 minutes, I can teach it to a table of people.
Oh, can I have a pocket you? I just need a pocket Peter. It's like, I don't know. He can explain.
It's unrelated to games. This is just the thing you want.
Yeah.
Peter's going to be the version of the Clippy at the corner of
Oh,
a
yeah,
game.
yeah. A little blue-bearded avatar being
Yeah.
like, hey, can I help? I have some friends in Toronto who, the way they put it is they don't ever want to learn a game unless I'm teaching it. And it's just because I do it so much, because I have to teach my own games and I have to learn games. And there's a book, The Player of Games by Ian, what's his name? Ian, I want to say Ian Colfer, but that's Artemis Fowl.
It
Ian
is,
Banks,
yeah.
Ian M. Banks, which is part of the Culture series. And it's really interesting because like the premise of that is it's a futuristic utopian universe where they don't have video games, they only have board games, and the main character is the titular player of games. And he has to it's so ridiculous. He has to go and basically help them invade an alien civilization by playing the game that everyone in the civilization plays. And the people who are orchestrating this are like, yeah, you'll be able to do this because yes, their game is infinitely complicated and it takes people a lifetime to master, but every game's just made up of bits of other games, so you'll be
Right.
fine. And
Yeah.
they're right, he's fine. And so that's how I feel. Like opening a game, it's not like I'm going to be like, what, like Macro Micro City. That's different to any other game published, right?
Mhm.
Like that
Yep.
is radically different from Catan, like you name any game, and that is as far away as you can get. That's sort of the limit. Like you're never going to pull out a game and be like, okay, first step is did everyone bring a goat, and also
Yeah.
when did you last get your haircut? Like it's all confined. So I love rule books. I genuinely have a passion for rule books. My co-designers are like, Peter, you're in charge of the rule book, and I'm like, yes, ha ha ha. And they're like, this is not a gift. This is us offloading the part
Yeah.
we don't like. I love it.
Because so through the show, I've met a few different game designers and good friends with a couple budding ones and the people that have published, and they despise writing rules and writing rule
Oh, I
books. Like
love it.
they
I
know
love
they
it.
know the rules of the game and they can explain it, but the whole writing it down and I guess that's an important thing because there's lots of complaints about games come from the rule book. So
Yes,
I guess
absolutely.
I this might be a good question. Well, it is going to be a good question because I've come up with it. What do you
Like you're
think?
battling your imposter syndrome in real time.
What do you think makes a good rule book then?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this slightly orthogonally. So feel free to re-ask if at the end you're like, Peter, cool. Could you actually answer the question now? The more I design, and I'm 10 years into this now. The more I design, the more I design to the teach. So I like intertwined systems. I love intertwined systems. Like anytime you make a decision, but you're actually making 6 decisions, that's my jam. But if you lean too hard into that, or in fact, if you lean into it at all, your game becomes a nightmare to teach. Because it's like, okay, step one, pick which worker space you want to do. Now, before you do that, you've got to understand that at the end of the game, and before you understand that, you've got to understand that like you start ping-ponging around. To tell you how to take your first turn, I need to write a treatise. I have a game called Dracula's Feast. It was my literal second ever design and my second ever published game, third ever published game. And I was very proud of it at the time. I was a little baby designer. That game is a 15-minute teach for a 3 to 5 minute game. And it just exemplifies like the way that I used to think, which was like, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. Every action you take in that game, you need to know exactly what the state of everyone else's like everything is. And it's very clever, but it's not playable by humans in a fun way. So nowadays I design to the teach of the game. So if the first thing you need to do is take income, cool. All you need to do is how I'm working on a game right, like literally today. Between on either side of this podcast, I've got meetings about this one game that I've got in my head. And so, if you need to take income, the only things I want you to care about are where do you get it from, what do you look for, where do you get it from, where do you put it. That's all you should need to know for income. If hey, take income means I also need to understand that you've currently got the chancellor out, who means that if you take more income, like, no, I just want it to be as simple as possible. So I think to, like I said, very obliquely answer your question, the trick to a good rule book is a game that's designed to be a good rule book.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess the reason I bring that up is I like intertwining systems too, where, like you said, where you take an effect and that might have an ongoing effect or a flow-on effect.
Right.
But that I find that's really hard to then go and explain. If you have it like a script in the rulebook when you're going to teach it, then you don't forget anything. He used to be a host on our show, Def, and I would always marvel in how Def would teach games because he'd never seemed to skip an effect, and it was almost like he knew the question that you're going to ask beforehand.
The way that the way you write a good rule book is I still love intertwining effects. Like my games are still very deeply interconnected, but the effects don't matter until you get to that part of it.
I've always said that I think a good rule book is one that's easy to reference.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
games like,
Well,
say, Civilization, for example, which we've talked about, there's obviously so much to front load, but I think almost by virtue of the game's style, it necessitates that front loading.
the game I'm talking about is a 3-hour Euro.
Yeah,
You
totally.
can't sit down and start playing that. But I practiced my teach this morning, and it came out to about 20 minutes, which is
Nice.
still, longer than things in Rings.
Yeah. But it's not twice or three times the length of the game. Like I think that's
exactly.
important.
I've gone in the right direction.
So I guess it's more part of your design philosophy then that you kind of prioritize accessibility.
Yeah, accessibility and elegance, I'd say, are the two keywords. When I'm not on this podcast, on the rare occasion I'm not talking to you guys, I host my own podcast called Fun Problems, which is all about game design. And my co-host and I actually argue about this a little bit because I have become fanatical about cutting rules, cutting exceptions, cutting chuff. I've talked about this so many times lately. I'm reading this book called On Writing Well by, I think it's William Radkin. And it's a book on novel writing. Oh, you know it?
It's so good. Sorry, continue. I want to hear your thoughts.
It's so good. Okay, so Lauren can back me up here. I'm not a crazy person. It's this book about writing, and the kind of core philosophy of this book is 2 sentences with the same information. The one that is half the length with half the complex words is more than twice as good. It's like 100 times as good. The way I think about it is complexity cost. So every single time you add any kind of rule or need to reference or anything like that to your, think of it as a dollar thing and it compounds. Like the first time you do it, maybe it's $1. The second time it's $10. The third time it's $100. If you can cut one of those rules, you've cut, an order of magnitude of complexity in your game. 2 games that provide the same amount of, I'm going to use the word fun. I don't, even though my podcast is called Fun Problems, I move away from the word fun, but 2 games that provide the same amount of fun, but one that does it with half the mental overhead. I think I was actually listening to your show and someone said something along the lines of yeah, I like this game better because you just have to do less work, but you get the same experience. I can't remember who or what episode or anything like that, but that's the crux of it. And especially new designers are very in love with yeah, but it makes it more fun. It's cool, it makes it more fun, but at the cost of $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
I have this game called Village Pillage, which is probably before Things of Rings my most successful game. It's got technically 7 expansions, but 3 really big expansions that each encompass multiple expansions. So we've got well over 100 cards in that game. They're all unique. They all do different things. They do really cool things. And I am very, very proud of the fact that we don't have an errata, an FAQ, a reference for the cards. Every card is completely self-contained. So again, Lauren, to your point of I think a rulebook should be a good reference book. I think the best rulebook doesn't need to be a reference book. If players are intuitively doing one thing, design the game around that. If your gut instinct is A, but the rule is B, no, the rule is now A, and you, the designer, have to go and do the work to make that work.
I think that's a really interesting point because I always harp on about the fact that in narrative board games, the writing is hot trash and it's never good enough.
Very much. That sounds so unprofessional, but yes, it is.
Look, with some notable exceptions, but I guess talking about writing for a novel versus a rule book. In a novel, it's just to kind of be consumed. If you write or if you can kind of convey something in the simplest terms, it really demonstrates that you know that thing. But in novels, you're just kind of talking to get across a point.
Brain.
But in a rule book, there's very much kind of an interaction and a back and forth because people are going to go back to it and come out of it. So it's in a rule book more important to know not just that I'm conveying something simply, but to understand how to convey it, but also to understand really how it's going to be received. I've had some games that I've taught. What's the example that I'm thinking of? I'll go to the recesses of my brain, but to find it, I'll go to the memory palace eventually. But there was a game specifically that I taught a bunch of times, and the same rules confusion came up in every
time.
Play of that game. It was either because of the symbology or how you would anticipate the rules to interact. But I learned to preempt that confusion every single time because they didn't understand how their rules were going to be received.
As a designer, the natural inclination is yeah, they get it if I teach it right. as a 10 years in designer, the inclination is like, you shouldn't have to teach it right. I think a lot
Yeah,
about games
yeah,
being
yeah, right.
robust in the sense of, if you get a rule wrong, does the game still play? Dracula's Feast that I mentioned earlier is the least robust game in existence. If you get something wrong on my turn, the whole game is ruined. So it's 15-minute teach for a 5-minute play that you probably have to restart 5 times because someone goes. I'm allowed to crap on it because it's my own game, but it's such a disaster on so many levels. We published it twice. We published it as Dracula's Feast and then Dracula's Feast New Blood, because I was like, I'm gonna get this to work, and I've grown up since then. But a robust game. So Critter Kitchen is fulfilling to Kickstarter backers right now. In fact, I think Australia is being delivered like in the next week or two at time of recording. So by the time you listen to this, if you're an Australian Critter Kitchen backer, you should actually have it. It's a slightly finicky priority system, which, if you play it wrong, the game still functions absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like it's got a few of those things where it's like, look, this rule isn't as elegant as I would have liked in an ideal world, but if you mess it up, it doesn't break the game at all. It's still 100% playable.
Yeah.
So the more robust a game is, the more room you have for finickiness. Now, I still lean towards cutting the finickiness whenever you can, but it's the difference between playing it wrong means, oh, we might as well not play it, and playing it wrong is like, oh, next time we'll have a slightly better experience.
Yeah.
And that is a huge difference.
Because that was actually going to be my follow-up question, is that there are some games that I think are difficult to teach by virtue of how obtuse and unusual the rules are, not because they're difficult.
Decrypto.
Decrypto comes to mind, Ginkgopolis comes to mind, Nikosu Dice comes to mind. They kind of just don't fit into the heuristics that board gamers develop around how they think games should go, and by virtue of that, they become hard to teach. So I was going to ask, do you think that having this philosophy kind of limits you from making those kinds of games?
I'm going to make the I'm going to turn everyone against me by giving the braggiest answer. So let me immediately tangent. One of the reasons I moved to America was a thing called tall poppy syndrome, which every Australian should be aware of. And again, for international listeners, tall poppy syndrome is this idea that, like, if the farmer looks out at a field of poppies and they're all the same height, he's like, everything's fine. If he looks out and one poppy is higher than the others, he's like, oh, time to cut down that field. So it's sort of the job of the poppies to tear down that tall poppy. Australia and England as well, but especially Australia, has the worst case of tall poppy syndrome in the world. I like myself. In Australia, that means I'm a dickhead. In the US, that means I fit in. It's like night and day. So apologies, Australian listeners. I'm gonna like myself briefly, and you're welcome to, as a result, hate me for it. Decrypto, I think, is one of the most brilliant games of all time. Feel free to hate me for that. I love it. I think it's just incredible.
You're not going to have any arguments here.
My dream is to like have a group that I play it with every week, because I play with a lot of new players all the time, and so I have to teach it every time. And teaching Decrypto, like for as brilliant as Decrypto is, the teach of that game is at the very, very opposite end. It is the worst game it's the worst game I own to teach, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have designed a game that is my attempt to solve the Decrypto problem. And this is why I'm like, this is so braggy. It's coming out from All Play. Currently, the name is Triangulate or Triangulation. And it is my attempt to make Decrypto with the world's simplest teach. Now, I don't think it's as good as Decrypto, because what is? Like, Decrypto is just like one of those top 10 of all time games. But in what I was saying earlier about like the cost of entering triangulate, I don't know what we're calling it yet, is
something
that
with triangles.
I could teach you in 20 seconds how the game plays, and then it scratches the same part of the brain as Decrypto. I don't think as well. I don't think it has the arc. I think Decrypto is amazing. But in terms of like accessibility, to use your word from earlier, Lauren, I have hit that. I'm so proud of it. I think it's my best design like ever.
Wow.
I'm really, really proud of that one.
That's exceptional.
Did that in any way answer the question?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Oh yeah. Actually, no. Let me answer a second time, even though I did. So this is the debate that I have with my co-host. Is that he's like, well, sometimes you need to, and I'm like, that. I think that you asked, does it limit you? And I think that thinking it limits you is what limits you. And this is philosophical mumbo jumbo, but like, if you approach every problem with there is a solution, we just have to find it, you are 1,000 times more likely to find it than if you go, this thing is an unsolvable problem. And the longer I do this, the fewer problems I find are actually unsolvable.
Yeah.
You can find a solution. It might take a team of 10 people. Like, you might have to take it to a playtest event and be like, hey, everyone, solve this problem. But doing that, assuming it has a solution, means that you are more likely to solve it than if you go, it won't, and you compromise. In no way am I trying to say Decrypto shouldn't have been published. I'm so glad that exists. I think that opened the door for a bunch of really interesting designs. I think saying, well, Peter, if you're this hard into elegance and accessibility, doesn't that mean you can't whatever? No, not if you genuinely believe, as I do, that it doesn't limit you from doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to answer the question a third time. No.
You mentioned before that you played lots of prototypes and you're just lucky to be able to learn them endlessly playing prototypes. Looking at your own podcast with Fun Problems, there's a couple of topics that you spoke about that I thought leaned into this quite well. One of them was a minimum prototype. So
yes,
obviously,
the MVP we call it.
Yeah. So I've play tested a little bit, and I have my own opinions on what you should at least have as a bare minimum. Now, I'm just a dude that talks about games. I don't make games or anything like that.
Hey,
so
you're a very handsome dude who talks about games. Let's use the full description.
So I would like to know what has been the most helpful type of prototype, how much work should be put into how it looks, and then so on and so forth.
That's a really good question. And this is one of those things where my opinion shifts over time. When we're talking about the MVP, the minimum viable prototype, I'm going to keep using that. I realize sports fans are going to be like, Peter, that's not what that means. When we're talking the MVP, that for me is like, you've got an idea for a game. Lauren has woken up and been like, you know what? There's no games about people using guitars as swords. This is what I want. A guitar sword battling game. So you've got an idea and you've got a mechanic in your head. What you want to do is, before doing anything else, put it on the table and play it. And so that's the real purpose of the MVP. The minimum viable prototype is just to see if that even begins to work. What do you need? So let's use Things and Rings as an example. If you haven't played it, Things and Rings is these 3 overlapping rings that you're putting cards into. The MVP for that, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but it'll immediately make sense, was 3 pieces of paper. Just like 3 white pieces of paper with a thing written in each corner. And it was like, yeah, look, if it's in this part, just pretend it's overlapping. This is for playing with other designers. I would not subject handsome podcast hosts to something like this, because other designers are like, look, we understand that we're just seeing if the bare idea works at all. For the things in that, I have a game called French Toast, and I just pulled the cards from that. Or if I didn't have French Toast, I would have grabbed them from code names, I just needed some words and some rings, which I just used blank pieces of paper for. And that was the absolute MVP to play that game. Now, once I've got a game working, I like to start thinking about product vision. Part of the reason I'm so prolific is that I don't just pitch games to publishers, I pitch products.
Yep.
My game Fiction, I don't know if you guys have played that. It's also out from Allplay. It's like Wordle. So one person is the machine in Wordle, everyone else is playing Wordle. But the person who is the Wordler, they're called the librarian in mine, they always tell one lie.
Mm.
And so for that one of the things that I really wanted in the pitch to that was that you have to get a 5-letter word, right? If you let people make up their own, I discovered it's a disaster. I was playing it with my another designer called Sean, and he picked the word carts, Karts, which is a dictionary word. It's absolutely a viable word, but no human would ever guess that, because why would you guess Karts?
Like Mario Kart.
Like Mario Kart. It's a real word. Like it's outside of Mario Kart. It exists as a word. He was legit to play it, but oh man, it made me angry. You need to have a little piece of paper with like, here, pick a word from this list, right? What I wanted that to be like a page from a public domain novel with all the 5-letter words highlighted. You don't need that for an MVP. That is the opposite of MVP. That required hours of me grabbing public domain things and and rearranging them so there were more 5-letter words. But for the pitch, I did that work because I wanted to show the whole product vision. So these are the 2 extremes. The MVP is just like, what's the ugliest, fastest version you get to the table? Because most games won't survive that. If you've spent 10 hours like I did on Fiction, getting that together for the first playtest to fail, cool. There's also this annoying effect where the more time you've put into it, the more reluctant you are to change it.
Yeah, yep.
And so the MVP should be like, get it to the table, see if the idea works. Cool. Make your changes, get it to the table, see if the idea works. Once you're at a point where it's stable and people are like, oh, this is actually working, this is fun, then I tend to put a little bit more time into the product side of it. Does that distinction make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
And then when it's to a publisher, I'm generally pitching something so that, Joe from Allplay, who I work with a lot, he just signed 2 days ago, he signed his 9th Peter C Hayward game. So that is a very fruitful collaboration. He's doing a new version of French Toast that I mentioned earlier, coming out soon too. Joe is really good at having a product vision that is better than mine. Like, this is one of the reasons I like working with him. But there are some publishers who, unless you show them the thing, they won't be able to see what the final product looks like. So as often as possible, I like to be like, here is the product. You can take something, add art to it, etc., and put it on the shelf. And that way, the leap that they have to make is less. And the less work someone has to do, and this is actually very similar to how I design games, the more likely they are to say yes and enjoy it.
So that's interesting because you yourself have published games with
Yes.
Jelly Bean. And has that helped you as well, knowing, okay,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have this term that I use called inside out versus outside in thinking. And nothing to do with the Pixar film, which is my favorite movie, but unrelated. Inside out thinking is like, I'm gonna use Jim Henson as a random example. Jim Henson is my favorite creator of all time. I love Jim Henson. I have all the Jim Henson books. I've watched a lot of his movies, etc., etc. So from the inside, Jim Henson is number one, right? Like, he is the North Star. He's the gold standard. One day I went to like a Muppet trivia thing, and the questions were stuff like, cool, in episode 17 of this. And I was like, I haven't even seen that season. So inside out thinking is Jim Henson's my number one. Outside in is, I am not a world expert on Jim Henson. Just because I like him a lot does not mean that I am the best at the world at it. So when it comes to pitching games, my best game might not be good enough for the market. I'm talking general me. Like, as a designer, you're like, this is the best I can make, therefore it deserves to be published. From a publisher point of view, it's like, okay, but that's not the best game I've seen even this week. So it doesn't inside out versus out. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Totally.
Yep.
I'm a very like I said, I have a systems brain. I need systems.
I'm interested, just to go back to the prototype and French toast conversation. I do have French toast in my
really?
downstairs. I love French toast.
It's Till This Triangular Game. I think it's the best game I made. So
I heard the conceit of it, and I just thought the idea of just yelling French toast at someone was quite funny. If anything, I would say I wish it was more about French toast. But so great. I was interested because I read the design diary that you had done for French toast, and you said that you encountered issues. People weren't going quick enough, and you were trying to get people to rush and just to work out how people play. It was tricky.
That's actually the fiction design diary. In the fiction design diary, I talk about French toast so much. I talk about French toast as much as I do about fiction. But that is the fiction design diary. I assume you guys have show notes, and we can link it in the show notes. And so, French toast, I ran into this problem where the game works if you just guess. Every guess gets you information. But as soon as you make it feel scarce, people just clam up. So actually, the graphic designer is also, I'm going to interlink some things. You ready? The friend of mine who doesn't like learning games unless I'm teaching it to her is the graphic designer, and she did all the art on the little toast cards for French toast. So that's the same person. Named Frankie. I love her. We have a great relationship. We met when she wrote me hate mail, and since then we've been firm friends. And
as a normal friendship begins.
I feel like that's standard. I barely even needed to say it. So one of the reasons I think that's one of the best things I've ever worked on is that it always lands. And as game players, you understand the value of a game that always lands. Things in Rings lands 60-70% of the time. When it does, it lands hard. But some groups just bounce off it. It's quite divisive. People don't like the subjective nature, or they love the subjective nature of it. French toast, literally, and this is not me being a braggart, I have never seen fail. That was with a company for about a year or two. They ended up shutting down their board game division, not publishing it. But I entered the pitch being like, hey guys, this is the best prototype you'll ever play, and you're going to want to sign this. And they were like, they were Americans, so they were okay with it. But they were like, okay, Peter, sure thing. And then a week later, I got an email being like, you were right. That's not fair. You shouldn't be able to say that and have it be accurate. So Frankie, the graphic designer, sent me a message once and was just like, Peter, I played French toast and it didn't land. And I was like, what? That's so interesting. Like, this is new data for my data brain. And so I think I literally jumped on a call to interrogate her because I was like, tell me more. I must know. She'd played without the timer. You can't play that game without the timer or it won't land. And so with French toast, I played that for months in prototype form, just trying to get people to guess more. And in the end, I added a timer, and people, if instead of the guesses being scarce, I made the time scarce, and you have to get as many guesses as you can, and people are guessing. And it had this compounding. It had this compounding effect. And the more guesses you make, the more information you have. So the more guesses you make, so the more information you had. And I just had to switch people over to that thinking. But that game, I had those word cards for months without any changes because the words weren't the problem. And so going back to my idea of robustness, the more robust a prototype, then the more you can kind of play it. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that because I have a group of friends that I can't play non-serious games with. When I say non-serious games, I mean games that need you to perform in a particular way. So, for example,
yeah.
Deception, Murder in Hong Kong also doesn't work with them
Yeah.
because they want to sit and analyze and look at all the
Yeah.
different things. Oh, well, they
They would love
moved
Dracula's
that
Feast.
way. But also French Toast, which I adore and has landed for me so many times, didn't work with them because they were like, oh, let's just play without the timer. And in my mind,
No,
it's there
you
for a
can't.
reason. It's there for a reason.
Yeah, it absolutely is. French Toast, just to give context, you're trying to guess an object. And the way that you guess it is by comparing it to other objects. And the person who knows the object will always say which one it's closer to. So if the answer was a rainbow and I said painting, you think, okay, is a rainbow closer to a painting or to French toast? It's closer to a painting.
Mhm.
So now you're comparing to painting. And then if I said a stone, you'd be like, is a rainbow closer to a stone or to a painting? It's closer to a painting. If I said a cloud, you might be like, ooh, is it closer to a painting or a cloud? I think it's closer to a cloud. And part of what I wanted to do with that game was solve the the dead face codenames problem, where in codenames, when you give your clue, you can't show any emotion. You have to be like zombie or whatever.
I have a funny story about code names where I was playing it on a school retreat and someone questioned me and was like, where's the face bag? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you got to play with a face bag. And I was like,
Connor, this is awkward because every time someone plays with you, they're like, Connor, where's the face bag?
Yeah,
and
that's
this
right.
Just happen to be code names.
Yeah. The brown paper bag. Yeah, that's right. And he goes, no, we had to. Someone was so bad at keeping a straight face, they had to put a pillowcase over their face, and they just called it the face bag.
So French toast, I very deliberately wanted to avoid the face bag. I was sick of people putting my face in a bag. And so as the person who knows the word, you are meant to be as expressive and like, oh,
Yeah.
cloud, I guess. Like, that's the goal. As well as that, there's a feature where you have like these most to least, and you draw an adjective card. So it could be damp, or it could be cheap or expensive or whatever. And so you're like, look, this is very expensive or not very expensive, or, not at all expensive. And when I taught it, I overemphasized the facial expressions and I overemphasized the adjective cards. And so the people playing thought that the comparing words thing was sort of an afterthought, and it was all about facial expressions and adjective cards. So in that case, like I found the limits of French toast robustness in that, like, if you teach it with the complete wrong emphasis, it doesn't land. I have a game out from Button Shy called Converge. I don't know if you guys have seen or played that one. It's a it's little 2-player 18 card game because it's what Button Shy does. I designed those cards. Those cards have 3 features. They have a number, they have a suit. Sorry, 4 features. A number, a suit, which is also the action, and then a goal. And you can either play it for the number and the suit in your collection, or you can play it to the middle for a goal, or you can discard it for its action. I had those cards for 20 playtests without changing them, trying to find what the game actually was. I kept on tweaking it, but those cards weirdly robustly stayed exactly the same for all 20 playtests because they just didn't need to change. So I love a robust component.
In multi-use cards are kind of like my... If a game has that, I'm like, yeah, I at least want to play with it and see...
Have you played Converge?
I haven't played Converge yet.
No, you should check it out.
Yeah,
it's on print and play too if you don't want to pay Australian shipping. They're doing a Kickstarter. There's actually Converge 2 is coming to Kickstarter later this year. So if you do want to get into it, it'll have all 6 sets, the 3 original sets and the 3 new ones.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll definitely look it up. I don't know if it's similar to, but I was going to talk about Compile on this show. I don't know if you played Compile
I haven't played it yet.
Yeah.
No, that's by Greater Than Games, right? I really want it's on my list. One of the downsides of playing as many prototypes as I do is if I've got a game day, it's probably prototypes and very rarely published games. I went to Tantrum Con, which is by the guys who do Tantrum House here in the US, and fully expected to play like a bunch of published games. Didn't play one for the whole 3 or 4 days. And I had a great time. I played a lot of... they invited me as a special guest, similar to PlayCon. And I went up to them. I was like, "Hey, what can I do to justify my special guest status?" And they're like, "Go play prototypes." And I was like, "Okay,"
Mm.
my favorite thing to do
Yeah,
anyway. So
yeah.
I didn't even get that many of my games out. I was just playing designers' prototypes for 3 days. I had a wonderful time, but it means I didn't play any of the published games that were on my list.
Just to link back to our earlier conversation, I'm assuming you would have read the Space Biff review of Converge, but he describes the game as the card game equivalent of one good sentence, which I thought was just so apt.
I am so back when I first played Twilight Imperium, like the first time I ever stepped into games, I think Space Biff was writing then, Dan Thoreau. And so before I became a published designer, he was my favorite critic. Like I love his stuff. I don't even agree with him a lot of the time. I just love his writing. I think he's the most incredible board. No offense to this very handsome couple that I'm talking to right now, but I think he is the best person in board games media to like for
Agreed.
his pure skill of writing. And so the fact that he's having a brief love affair with my games is so delightful for me.
There you go. You finally impressed someone with your board
Yeah.
games. It's happened for you. It's come full
I
circle.
sent him my first published design, which is Scuttle that I made myself, and he passed it on to someone else on his team who reviewed it negatively. And I was like, this is the like, even if he'd reviewed it negatively, I would have been happy. But he gave it to someone else to not like, and I was like, no, this is the worst case scenario.
So there is something that I wanted to talk about, and because
Yes.
I came upon it, your YouTube channel. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, because why don't you explain what's going on with your YouTube channel and what people can find on there?
So there is a real shortage in the world of people murdering horses on camera. And I thought, you know what? There's a niche and I can
Why
fill it.
did I leave it open like that? I knew you were going to take it down that direction.
So as mentioned, my obsession is movies and TV, and Inside Out's my favorite movie. And I am particularly obsessed, and I have been since I was a teenager. I'm obsessed with Easter eggs in movies, which is so specific. And Pixar are the kings of Easter eggs. So an Easter egg, the way that I use it in my videos is it's when they hide a reference to themselves or their other work. So, for example, there's a ball called the Luxo ball, which is actually on the shelf behind me. I don't know if you guys can see it there. That doesn't help the listeners, but that's where it is.
Yeah.
And that was from one of their early shorts, and it's been in almost every Pixar film. And so, like, finding the Luxo ball is like a little game that you can play. My YouTube channel specializes in I obsessively go frame by frame through the film. And so I find all the Easter eggs that people know, and I find some that no one has discovered. Like I've found stuff that I'm fairly sure that since the person originally put it in, no one's even thought about it for the last. There's a single frame in Toy Story. This is one of my videos. There's a single frame in Toy Story where we see the contents of Andy's bookshelf downstairs. So not the one in his room, but like his parents' bookshelf. And on that shelf, there's about 20 titled books that you can only see the titles of for a single frame. And one of them is Nicholas Nickleby, but not spelt Nicholas, spelt Knickerless.
Right.
Nicholas Nickleby. Nickleby also with a K at the start. So Nicholas Nickleby is not just a reference to underpants. It is specifically a reference to a John Cleese sketch from before Monty Python.
Wow.
So he did a sketch with Marty Feldman where someone was coming into I think it was Marty Feldman. Someone came into a bookstore trying to find Nicholas Nickleby, but not the one by Charles Dickens. Nicholas Nickleby spelled the other way. And so this single frame of Toy Story has a reference to and this is 1995 that film came out. So there was no YouTube. There was like, you had to have seen it. Like there was no DVD. This predates Python, so there probably like wasn't even a VHS at the time. You had to know that sketch and freeze on that frame. So like I genuinely don't think anyone has ever found that until I did. Is that answering your question, Connor?
That is, because even as a kid, you sort of picked up on the different like Easter eggs or cameos that there would be. Now I think though that when people see an Easter egg, and I feel like Marvel films are partly responsible for this, so is that, that's in the same universe, and then they construct this whole thing about this, and it kind of feels like
I despise the Pixar theory. If you've ever heard of that, it drives me nuts. People
where like it precursors like the next two films or something like that.
No.
Because the van from Toy Story is in this movie, it means that it happened in the same city, and then this person is this person's dad, and all these sorts of shenanigans.
This one guy basically wrote, I think of it as fan fiction. It's fan fiction. Yeah. And he's like, here is why Finding Nemo, Monsters, Inc., Toy Story, every Pixar film is set in the same universe. And it's so convoluted that like, A, it's not true, obviously, but B, if it was true, they wouldn't do it in this ridiculous way where like the witch from Brave is Boo from Monsters Inc. And it's just like, why? Why would she? No, it's
How
just
does
not
that
true.
happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Cars is the hard one that they had to fit in. So they really had to work hard to make the Cars universe part of the same universe as the rest of it.
Because and the whole thing with, and I guess it was a business decision for Marvel, but they would drop little Easter eggs and it's like, oh well, that means that's coming out and that's coming out. Oh, that means that. And I kind of got like, I had such fatigue where it's like, I just want to enjoy the movie, and like if there's a little reference and that's fun, I don't want to think about 4 or 5 movies from now what that means. But I always loved, and we did it as kids. Probably like Monsters Inc. There might have been a reference to Finding Nemo or something like that.
The one for me was in the cinema watching Monsters Inc. At the very end, Boo comes up and hands a bunch of toys over, and the toys are the Luxo Ball, Jessie from Toy Story, and Nemo. And Nemo was not going to come out for another 18 months. So like, that was a real flash forward. Yeah, that was such a delight watching that in cinema. They're not as obvious about that anymore because whatever, the corporates changed or whatever, but they still do hide a lot of stuff in there. So it's really delightful to go through. I do the whole film frame by frame twice, which is a level of obsessiveness that no one needs, but I really enjoy doing.
So I guess it would be a little bit unfair to invite you onto the show and not ask about some of your upcoming releases. So please feel free to tell us about some of the stuff you've got coming out.
Yeah, so I sat down and did the math, and I've got 10 new games coming out this year. So I won't go through all of them, but there's definitely some cool stuff coming out. Converge is having a second Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. That's going to be really exciting.
One game that we think our listeners, and I think one of the hosts, Jules, is going to like a lot, which is a deduction bluffing style game that you've got coming out.
Vegas Strip? Yes. Okay, so Vegas Strip is another all-play game. As mentioned, they're my... What's the Kevin Smith term? My heterosexual life partner. They're my professional life partner. Me and Joe just have such a great relationship. I love his product vision. He loves my gameplays. Like it's a match made in heaven. So this one kickstarted last year. I'll tell you the story, which is that I was driving and I think I was listening to a board game podcast. And I remember thinking, like, how does Reiner Knizia do it? Because Knizia has 700 published games, something like that. Like, and they're all not all amazing, but like he just has this. I really admire the way he designs because he has a core design thing and then all the interesting decisions spring out of that. So I was just thinking, how does Knizia do it? Oh, he probably comes up with something like, and then came up with an idea in my head. It was like a gift from Knizia. And so I went home and just put a prototype together. It was garbage. And then for the rest of that design journey, my rule was, what would Knizia do? Like those bracelets, WWKD. Yeah. What would Knizia do? And so I find it really helpful to design either with a publisher in mind or in this case, a designer in mind. Making a game is 1,000 micro decisions. And if you don't know what you're doing, you just kind of flail around and there's no unifying purpose. By picking a publisher or designer to like aspire to, it helps shape those decisions into a really cohesive package. So this is not the question you asked at all, but every design decision I made was, what would Knizia do? What would Knizia do? I brought it to Joe under a very bland Knizia theme. And he was like, Peter, I love this game and I cannot publish it. Come back with a theme. And this was in Vegas. So we were at Dice Tower West. And so I walked back to my hotel and was like, oh, this would absolutely work. So all this preamble to say, in the game, you are card sharps. So you are cheating at Vegas hotels. And you know the one casino that you have bribed, and you know one that hasn't been bribed. Corrupt and safe, I think, is the terms we landed on. Bribed and safe. And so you are trying to make bets so that you can be the most at the one that you know is corrupt without letting anyone else know, because you can't make your biggest bet there because thematically the guy's like, look, I'll help you cheat, but you got to keep it sane. So if I can see that Lauren is betting really hard on one casino, I'm maybe like, oh, I think she's rigged that one. And so I want to bet my big one there. But if she's bluffing, then I've just blown my money. And if it's not rigged, then the person who spent the most gets nothing and everyone else gets a payout. So it's a game of like trying to like bid up your casino, but make people think you're bidding up the other one, but not actually be at the top. So it's this really cool, someone described it as an area control game, which isn't quite right, but also isn't quite wrong. And it's kind of a bidding game, but not quite. It's really annoying to find the BGG tags for some of my games. This one in Critter Kitchen is just like, it's not quite worker placement, but it's not worker placement. It's not quite bidding, sure. But it's not bidding. And so Vegas Strip coming out from All Play. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. All Play, they've done an amazing job with like clicky clacky pieces. And the game comes in one of their $20 US boxes, which is tiny. It probably should have been a $40 game, because the amount that they have packed into that, like, it is a full 40-minute experience with 20, 30 replayable, like, varying player powers and chips and everything. And if you got it on Kickstarter, you get the deluxe clicky clackies.
It looks lovely. Also, Vincent Detroit art. It's just
Oh yes,
beautiful, beautiful
I
product.
I have, every time I make a game, I get a print of the art, and so for that one, I actually end up getting two. So I have two different Vincent Detroit art sitting
Oh,
on my wall
nice.
right now. Yeah, it's beautiful.
You mentioned triangulation aid.
Yeah, I shouldn't be spruiking that one too hard because it doesn't have a name yet.
Working title. Is there anything else that you're mulling over? I mean, clearly there is, but is there something that you wanted to talk about in particular?
Okay, there is. Which is, I listened to an episode you guys did a couple of episodes back where you interviewed the designer of Merchant's Cove.
Mm-hmm.
And his game that he brought to the table to talk about was Kelp. The host of that episode, which I believe, Lauren, you weren't on, but Connor, you were,
Yep,
went into this like really beautiful 10-minute diatribe about how they want a game that is very asymmetric dueling, where every different faction has their own minigame. I am excited to tell you that game is coming out from AEG. It is a co-design with me and my Fun Problems podcast co-host. It doesn't have a title yet, so it's probably still a few years, but you are different bugs. So I might be playing the butterflies and you're playing the locusts, or I might be the assassin bug and you are the queen bee. And it's 2-player only. You each get your own unique board that slot together, and each of you has your own kind of Merchant's Cove style minigame. So the queen bee is playing a pick up and deliver. It's a dueling game like Unmatched, and you specifically name dropped Unmatched in your thing. I was listening to that episode, and I immediately sent it to AJ and was like, they're talking about our game. They just don't know it yet. We've themed it all around the bugs. It's very, very asymmetrical. It's an Unmatched style dueling game. Like, if you go back and listen to that episode, everything you described there, except instead of sea creatures, they're insects, is exactly the game that we're working on.
That's so funny because, yeah, I've actually been thinking about that. And then every so often someone brings up kelp. And I was like, when's the kelp expansion coming? Like, not knowing that, like, they exist or whatever. So this is incredible. I wouldn't say I'm a bug dude, but insects do interest me because there's so much variation and, like, they're so different from us.
It's coming out with 6 factions, and, you know, assuming it goes well, AEG want to support that line and just do, like, another 6 factions every 18 months.
Oh my God.
Every combination plays wildly different to every other combination. The assassin bug is playing a hidden movement game, so it's like Unmatched, where one person is not even on the board. And playing that against the pick up and deliver is completely different to playing that against the Mancala, is completely different to playing that against the kind of Quedlinburg bag building faction. Like, they're all wildly different. So yeah, that's again I'm terrible at promoting here because that's too far out to even know what the title is. But
I'm already excited.
It's for you. We accidentally made a game specifically for you.
I'm gonna actually message Adrian after this show and be like, "You won't believe it. I'm not gonna spoil it." But I was like, "Just wait. You've got Elizabeth." That's so exciting. Oh man. That's
and AEG, as you know, like, they do great work, so we're really excited to work with them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of AEG stuff.
I love that it's 2-player as well, because there's only 2 wildly different things to explain. It's not, okay, this is how 5 different people's mini games work.
Yeah, we talked about this on the podcast. Like, we're trying to work out, we talk a lot about hooks, a mechanical hook, thematic hook, component hook are kind of the 3 that we focus on. And the mechanical hook for this, I think, is the asymmetry. And AJ, he was like, yes, but I think it's the fact that it's asymmetrical and teaches in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
Both of us are so focused on, like, cutting rules. It's one of the coolest things I've worked on.
Yeah, and it is interesting, and not to sort of talk about Carl's game too much, because I don't want to make his ego any bigger. Kidding, I love Carl.
He's American. He's allowed.
Very humble though. It'd be interesting to see how deep they wanted to make some of those mini games for Merchant's Cove, but knowing that, you know, you may have to teach 4 different mini games to 4 new players.
The thing that makes it work in our game is that there is the central board. So you guys are both familiar with Unmatched, I assume.
Yep.
So there's a central board, which is like Unmatched. And then your mini game is off the board. So it helps if you understand it, but you don't need to. Yep. All you need to know, and every faction except for the hidden movement, like, essentially works the same on the board. So, like, the bees, when they land on flowers, they get pollen and you want to stop them coming back. That sentence is everything you as a player need to know about how the queen works. You don't need to know the intricacies of their, like, anything, as long as you understand the part on the board. So we've very, very consciously and deliberately separated what's happening on the central board and what's happening in the mini game.
Yeah, awesome.
To again make that teachers. I'm so obsessed with making teachers as smooth as possible.
No, but it's fair because look at how busy people are, right? And
Yes.
what they want to do is they want to get an enjoyment out of a game. Now, you mentioned your first game, and if it's like, okay, like you're taking 15 minutes to explain a 5-minute game, that's not
It's a
like
bad ratio.
It is a bad ratio, but it's still only 15 minutes, right? And like you said,
Right.
you could play multiple games of that, so you end up playing it for 20 minutes. But I guess kind of what we were saying before, if it's a really long teach and the game itself is longer as well, then you're going, well, it's like what you said before. I could be playing this, which scratches the same itch, but only takes
Right.
half an hour.
And there's a bunch of factors, like very obviously, people don't like feeling stupid. And when people get a rule wrong, even if it's the game's fault, especially if it's the game's fault, they feel dumb. This is okay. Controversial statement. Get ready to cancel me. I want people to have a good time playing my games.
What? No.
And so it's not just
you're in the wrong business, my friend.
New designers especially focus on that, like, I want the game to be as fun as possible. Great, you absolutely want that. But those costs of making people feel stupid, of like having to learn the rules. Like I said, my friend will sit down and do his homework before teaching a game. It's going to sound very negative. I'm so focused on the negative aspects, but in eradicating them. Like, I want to get rid of that feel dumb moment. I want to get rid of that feel bad moment. I want to get rid of that rules mistake and teach and like, pause the game. We're going to pull out the rule book and be like, okay, no, because it's this one. And like, I just want to kill all of that. And I prioritize that so highly that it drives some of my co-designers nuts, because they're like, but Peter, this is amazing. I'm like, sure, but we can hit amazing without the cost. I'm like I said earlier, I'm 100% convinced we can, and we always do.
I say that all the time about games, that is the juice worth the squeeze? There are some games which are great, but it's just, I don't want to do the work to get there. I have other games that get me 95% of the way there for less effort. And kind of like you said, so much of the time it's about getting games to the table. And so much of the times it's about, can I teach this? Are people going to be bothered to sit and listen to this?
People listening in are going to be like, man, I'm going to go check out Peter's games. And hopefully you enjoy them. But also, there's such a gap between making a game and it coming out that like all these philosophies I have now, they're mostly going to apply to my games in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't check out my games, but I'm just saying, like, don't pull out one of my old games and be like, well, this doesn't match what he said at all, because it probably doesn't, because I'm always growing and learning.
You hypocrite. Yeah.
I do wonder about that. Do you kind of go through phases in your design philosophy? That Time You Killed Me is very different to Things and Rings.
I mentioned earlier, my favorite designer is Vlaada Chvátil. He's the man behind Code Names and Through the Ages, and that range I just love. So like that Time You Killed Me was me trying to, all my games are trying to solve a problem. So that Time You Killed Me was, I want to make an abstract that has content. I love content. I said there's 100 different cards in Village Pillage. Critter Kitchen comes with 20 critics, each of which like make the game radically different. That Time You Killed Me was me trying to do that with an abstract. And I'm very happy with how it worked out. And I don't think it's too rulesy. Like, I don't think it breaks any of my rules. But when I'm making that game, I'm not like, well, how can I make this the same weight as Things in Rings? Same as my 3-hour Euro. Like, I'm not applying the same tools. Does this make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I want that game to be the best version of it that it can be, not of the Peter C Hayward experience or whatever.
That's a great game. I also like that, you're right, because there's the little packs that you add as you go. It's kind of a rolling complexity as you're familiar with the game, which is perfect for that. Plus the nice little surprises of what you get.
Speaking of phases, I got obsessed with Balatro recently.
Oh my God, can we not? I've kicked my habit. Don't bring it up, please.
Okay, well, that made me go on a deep dive into roguelikes. And so I played a lot of Hoplite. I don't know if you've checked that one out, but Hoplite's amazing. And so one of my games that I'm about to hopefully sign with a company who I love very much is basically a tabletop roguelike. It's a solo game. So I'm speaking of phases, I'm in a solo phase at the moment. I've been wanting to make solo games for a couple of years, and I'm finally like, roguelike is my in. So I've got 3 solo game designs that I'm working on right now. And they all do that Time You Killed Me thing, which is essentially a roguelike. I didn't think of it like that at the time, but it scratches a similar itch. I'm doing that in solo games. So my current phase is solo roguelikes. This is the first game that I accidentally got addicted to of mine. Like, I was playing it 2 nights ago and I accidentally stayed up till 5 a.m. because I just wanted to finish the map that I was working. Like, I'd set myself a goal as an unlock and I just wanted to hit it. So I kept starting again. It was very Balatro. So that game again doesn't have a title or a publisher. It's not even signed yet. But that's my current phase. I'm like solo roguelikes. I want to make them so bad.
Yeah.
My next wave, as Lauren said, phase of stuff is going to be all Balatro inspired.
Yeah. Cool.
I shouldn't even. We haven't even started designing this, but the thing I want to make is. I feel like just by saying this, I'm causing bad karma, and someone's going to take the idea and run with it. The project that me and a frequent co-designer have like slated to be our next big one is that's the pitch. It's a $10 million idea. Please don't steal it. But like, I think that would blow up this industry in the best way. Sorry, Alex, for ruining our secret pitch.
You know that game you've been wanting for a long, long time? The one that's been on your wish list for ages? Yeah, that one. The one you've been adding to your cart and taking off again, umming and ahhing about whether you should get it or not? Well, I'm here to push you over the edge and say go to adventgames.com and add that to your cart right now. I bet you that Dean has a great price on it, he's got great customer service, flat rate shipping, and there's so many other goodies to explore on the website. Wonderful categories all organised to pick the exact game that's right for you and the group that you play with. So head over now, don't hesitate, to adventgames.com.au and add that game to your cart now.
Lauren, is there a game or a couple of games that you wanted to talk about and see if Peter might have played them or something similar?
I don't have to talk the whole time.
But I like you talking. It's making the neurons in my brain want to talk to each other.
Lovely.
That doesn't happen when he just talks to me. We need you, Peter. So I've got to play a few Button Shy games recently. I love a good solo game. The reason I've been enjoying some of the solo-only Button Shy games is because a lot of solo games require you to learn a game twice. Learn the game and then learn how it plays solo. And I really don't want to have to do that. And I don't have to do that with Button Shy solo games. A solo Button Shy game that I've really been enjoying is At the Helm. Have either of you heard of it or played it?
I've heard of it because I think by count I have the most Button Shy wallets published. Not the most games, but my games are all in multiple wallets. So like I have the most.
Yeah.
I'm on the Discord, so I see a lot of Button Shy conversation. It's a lovely Discord, by the way. It's one of my favorite Discord communities.
Oh yeah, I need to get on that because I adore a good Button Shy game. Just the dinky little wallets. This At the Helm, I was very surprised by because of how hard it was. It's I guess a nautical theme, if you want to call it that. It's a little Button Shy that essentially fulfill objectives on cards. It's a hand management kind of tiny little deck building game, if you want to call that it manages to do that in 18 cards, which is really, really cool. But I think it does it quite effectively. And essentially all you're doing is you start with 3 cards and you'll play cards to kind of fulfill a particular objective. So that's sometimes, damage the Kraken, heal this amount or whatever it might be, right? To do that, you play them and then you buy a new card from this kind of waterfall down market where you have to buy from the bottom and then a new card will slot above it. I've just found it exceptionally unusual and exceptionally effective. Sometimes I think with Button Shy games, this is kind of a cool conceit, but I think it would have been a better game if there were more cards. But this one, I don't think that at all.
As a company, they are very consciously moving away from that. They don't, in the early days especially, they were very much like, hey, we've taken this big game, like it's Star Wars Rebellion in 18 cards, which, like you say, is a very fun gimmick. They're increasingly like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be like, here's a big game distilled. We want to be like, here is a game. And it just happens to have 18 cards. Yeah. They are, I think, really strongly and effectively moving in that direction. So I think this is a really great example of that for sure.
Yeah. And the cards will do things like have abilities, let you heal health or trash a card in the market to gain this instead. And so you kind of constantly just some lots of lovely little micro decisions and trying to buy cards in the right order to complete a certain objective, because I need to get the cards means you need to have all these 3 things in your hand at the same time. And you think, okay, well, how am I going to manage my health while also keeping the deck spelt to get things in the right order to do that? And so timing is essential in this game. A Button Shy game, which I bounced off, called Counter the 9 Estates, which was all about just having things in the appropriate order, which maybe my brain wasn't switched on enough to get. This it felt really interesting. It didn't feel just
Convoluted,
maths.
or
It didn't feel
Yeah.
like just a totally, I guess, transparent puzzle that if you sat there and thought long enough, you could solve it. It kind of is the thing that wants to be played quickly.
Have
It
you
doesn't.
played Numpsters or
Yes.
Spaceshipped?
I've not played Spaceshipped. I have played Numpsters.
Oh, yeah. Numpsters, I think, is similarly like just elegant and smooth and wants to be played quickly, and there's no fiddling. I mean, there's very minor hand fiddliness, but not really. Like, I think Numpsters is an exceptional solo design. Spaceship is probably my favorite solo game of all time. All my complaints about solo games, you're right, do not apply to Button Shy solo games. They're just so elegant. And Spaceship, it's just arrived. I haven't played it yet. Fantasy Form, I think it's called, is the sequel. Like it's a remake, but fantasy instead of sci-fi. And it's the same base concept, and it feels like a full game, but in 18 cards. Like it doesn't feel like an 18 card game. It takes an entire table. Every card is always doing things. You feel like you're playing a little like spaceship adventure game in 18 cards. Amazing design. Lucas Gentry, I think, is the designer of that. Yeah, strong recommend.
Really been
I'm
enjoying.
going to check out At the Helm. That sounds amazing.
It's very, very interesting. I think it achieves a lot with a little, which is true of a lot of Button Shy games, but I don't want to belabor how it plays because I think it's so quick.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you could get a print and play. Another one that I did play, which was a 2-player Button Shy game, which is not as typical for me, is Seasons of Rice, which is a lovely little spatial puzzle. You play cards which kind of have these diagonal lines drawn across them, and you're trying to enclose kind of little rice paddies, I think there must be. And they'll score based on, if there's houses in them, if there's people in them. But ones that are left unclosed at the end might score you negative points. And it's just a tiny little draft head-to-head of drafting these paddies and trying to kind of just make this lovely little enclosed circuit. To compare it to, say, Sprawlopolis, for example, you can't overlap the cards, and instead of having multiple goals, there's only one. So I find Sprawlopolis really kind of heady and just brain-burny in a way I've not played Circle the Wagons.
I think Circle the Wagons is my gold standard of 18 card games. Love Letter obviously is amazing. 16 cards is Love Letter, which is even crazier. But Circle the Wagons is Sprawlopolis, but 2-player head-to-head with the drafting system. So Seasons of Rice sounds like it's kind of between those two in a sense.
Yeah, I liked it. I think it's the same reason I bounced off Rove. I think it was just more thinking that I wanted for what the production is. And maybe that was just a mismatch in expectations. I think Rove is a very well-designed game. I think it's a good game. It just didn't find it fun. But Seasons of Rice, I feel like strikes the perfect balance for me of just, it's not the headiness of Sprawlopolis or the other Opolises, but it is a nice little quaint puzzle with enough different, every obviously card is double-sided with different goals. They make the most out of all the cards. Lovely little 18 card experience. So those are two that I've been enjoying, which is At the Helm and Seasons of Rice.
Lovely.
Nice. They sound fun. I'm already keen to check out.
They take up this much space.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's so good. Like you could just have a box of them, or have it on display.
Yeah, my girlfriend has in her wallet, in her purse at all times, Tussie Mussy and Converge.
Yep.
So when we're waiting for fast food or when we're waiting for something, we just pull it out, play around. She plays them with her mum. They're just lovely, compact little games. So Skulls of Sedlick too. We just added that.
Yeah. So Adrian, one of our hosts, is a big fan of that. He loves that game.
Same designer as Rove, actually. Skulls of Sedlick.
I didn't know that.
He's LA. Well, he was LA. He just moved to Colombia.
So I'm actually going to talk about a game that's not out at the moment, but
even at time of listening.
Yeah, and I think for a little while. But Lauren, last time we were on, we talked about trick takers. Both enjoy trick takers and things like that. So our friend and former host of the show, Sarah, she asked me, and I was happy to playtest a couple of her trick-taking games that she's been working on. So one of them's called I Don't Like Onions, and the other one's called The Spiritualists. So
I was hoping the other one would be called I Really Like Onions.
Yeah. It's like Pokemon Red and Blue.
Game.
Yeah. So And I thought I'd talk to you about this, Lauren, because you might be interested in, if you haven't already, trying one of her prototypes, if you want. I know she's got a printed prototype of I Don't Like Onions. And
What a great name.
yeah, it's really good. So the way that I Don't Like Onions works is you are effectively trying to fulfill a recipe on the board. And that recipe might be appealing to a particular customer, the amount of noodles or soup that you have in your bowl, and then also what type of onions that you want. And it's at a limit of red or white. And the people are represented with meeples, and then the onions are represented with, I'm trying to think
Actual onions.
now.
You have to bring your own onions to play this game.
The onions. And so each of them have a different token type, and each of them, it's either red or white. And what you're doing in your trick is, before you play the trick, you have to determine what you're going to bid. So you're effectively either trying to gain more tokens to fulfill the recipe, or lose tokens so that it doesn't count against you, because each of these recipes are on one track. So effectively, think about it. If you win a red meeple, you have to counteract that with a white meeple. So for every of those meeple types that you have at the end, you're going to move along those tracks. So if I want to, let's say, be at level 1 for the white meeple, I need to make sure that either I have 3 white meeples and 2 reds by the end. So before you play the trick, you want to determine what you're going to bid. And then in typical trick-taking fashion, by going last, you get a whole lot of information by going, I may want to win that trick because there's a lot of tokens that I want, or I definitely want to lose it because I don't want that trick at all. So
because I don't like onions.
I don't like onions, or whatnot. Now the thing is, with the onions, you actually might like onions because they are the trump suit. So onion trump regardless gameplay. But I think this is really, really fun. So each time I've played it, I've had a heap of fun. The last time I played it was with a member of the community who goes by Draven, who people would know. So he's a long-time listener of the show, and he's almost like our almanac, Peter. He knows everything. Like on episode this, Connor talked about that, and he said he didn't like it, but now he does. No, he's absolutely...
He's downloaded it all into his brain. That's
his
great.
brain is like your one for the learning of the game.
The systems,
it's systems one. So I really like the loop of working out, okay, do I want to win this trick? Do I want to lose it? Oh, that's really good for what I need for a particular side. I'm going to win that one, even though I'm going to lose. It counteracts what I want another way, and then I can plan to maybe lose those later down the track. It's very clever. I think it's really, really fun. You only play the one hand. So I know like trick takers, you play multiple hands to keep track. So you play the one hand, and all of that information of what tokens you possess is hidden. So no one really knows what you're going to be going for. There are only effectively 2 or 3 on each side. So it's that awesome push and pull. Am I going to lose this trick? Am I going to win it? You can bid high or you can bid low in terms of the tokens that you want to lose. And when you do, if you don't win the trick, you get to take a token of your choosing off the market. And any ones that are won or lost that you don't gain, then go back onto the market as well. So it's really, really good. I've had a lot of fun playing. I've played it maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's a must follow, except the loser of the trick can pick a rule where it's highest card wins regardless of suit. There's no trumps and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's an interesting twist. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So
trick taking is one of those like genres that I grew up playing 500, which you guys would know, but I have to explain 500 to Americans as euchre. It's like better euchre in every possible way.
Yeah, well, I played euchre and then just fell in love with 500 because I was like, I can't disappoint my partner. It's just me.
500 was my whole childhood. I think that is one of the most brilliant games. So I grew up playing 500, and the thing about 500 is that it's about the bidding and it's about the shaping your hand. That for me is the foundation of trick taking. And because that's not the case over here, like people play euchre or whatever, which doesn't have those elements or whatever game. Trick taking just rarely has those two things. I haven't made a trick-taking game yet, but if I do, it's going to like capture those 2 elements and just like magnify them to the roof. Because I just find that so fun and compelling.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it's not a genre that you've delved into more, because for me, and I said this on a podcast I was recently on, one of the best things about trick-taking is that when you teach it to people who know trick takers, you say, all right, it's a trick-taking game. You give them 4 keywords that explain half the game, and you say, okay, now here's what's different.
Yeah.
And just
it's a must follow trumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Exactly right.
absolutely.
It's such a profoundly robust foundation from which you can kind of build really fascinating games.
Yeah, I
Great.
can't remember who it was. Someone described my games once as like the game that's not for people who like that genre. So like That Time You Killed Me has repeatedly been called the abstract game that abstract players don't like.
Yeah.
Because it's I think Dan's review talks about like it's nonsense. Like, get out of here with your elephants and your top hats and your whatever.
Yeah.
And your gravity defying bushes or whatever the phrase was. And so trick taking, like the fact that it is so established almost like rankles me slightly. I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to make one that is this, but with a twist. I'd want to make like the trick taking game that people who play trick taking games don't like, and there's no audience for that.
Yeah.
Trick taking is so specific, and so if you exclude that audience, you're out of audience for it.
Yeah. One of the things that, and I said this to Sarah, one of the things I enjoy about traditional trick takers is you make your bid for the number of tricks you're going to win for that hand at the start. Not all of them, but that's generally the case. And that's what I like about I Don't Like Onions, is that it still has that, because there's going to be tricks that you don't want to win, the same way as made a bid and you've then won a hand that you didn't think you were going to win. And then you've got to scramble like, oh, how can I lose this one? Because I have the bower. Like, I hope someone's going to play the other bower and they can beat that, because I'm definitely going to win that one. Or which one, how can I de-suit? And that was a lot of the chatter that we had. So that's something that I really liked about I Don't Like Onions, is it harkens back to I don't just want to win everything. The other trick taker that Sarah has been working on is called the Spiritualists. This one's a little bit more complicated. You start off with a grid showing all the cards. Okay, so you're showing all the cards. And at the beginning, you place 3 tokens down on the cards that you don't want to win. So they will become negatives if you win them. This is open information to both players. The other cool thing about the Spiritualists is it's a 2-player game with an AI third player. And depending on the order of whose turn it is, there'll be open information of what cards that the AI player has, and you will get to choose which card is played. So the AI player can never win tricks. It's always going to be you or your opponent. So what you then get to see and plot is that, oh, okay, I can see that they don't want a particular card, and so I'm going to try and get them to win this card, and then it becomes negative. And there's that whole open information, closed information of what do people have. The other cool thing is that in your group of tokens, there are the bluffs. So you can put the token down thinking that they don't want to win it, but it's a bluff that can then change into, oh, I'm going to get points for that. Now, there's only 2 of them in the ones that you can put down. And you can put it down, you don't have to use it at all if you don't want to. But effectively, you will get points for every card that you want to win, and you will lose points for every card that you don't. And you play two hands, and then so that means that overall, in alternating order, each player will get to control the AI 5 times, but so someone will get to play it 3, and then someone will get to play it 2 times, and it'll flip. And of course, if you win, then you lead the trick as well. When I first learnt it, I thought, this is very brain burning. This is too complicated for my simple, smooth brain. But I've gone back and played it since. So again, I played it with James as well. And I just really, really enjoyed playing this. It's a lot of fun. I like seeing what the other person's got or what they're trying to get rid of, and looking at what the AI has, so I can see if I can dump something for them or make sure that my card's lower, and so on and so forth. It's again, really, really, really clever. Sarah's been working on this. The first time I saw it, I think, was end of maybe or middle of last year. So she's definitely been working on it since then. And yeah, so I thought I'd talk about it because, like I said, Lauren and I are both big fans of trick-taking games.
One of my favorite trick takers of all time is RoboTrick, which has
I don't know that one.
it's a 3-player only trick taking game, Peter, that has there's a 4th player who is an AI who has a set of rules that it plays by, and it has an open hand. And what I really like about that game is there's this very knowable part of the game, which is how the AI is going to respond to you. It's going to, if X, then it's going to lead with this. If Y, then it's going to follow this way, highest or lowest, when it's going to short suit itself, so on and so forth. One of the best parts about that game, because having this open information really could theoretically bog down the game and make it really crunchy, because it adds a level, like a cerebral element to the game. But then it subverts that by saying, adding this push your luck element, because you want to get points from winning tricks, but you only want to win 3 tricks, because any tricks won after that are negative points, and also any tricks lost to the AI also count as negative points for you.
Nice.
So that element makes it really funny and silly again. But I love the idea of having this kind of automated part of a trick taker, which is the whole system, right? Like you said, Peter, there's this whole kind of world to it that people know and love, which is the established meta around how you play and respond. But that's a very human part of the game. So having an AI also really challenges that notion of there's a matter of exactly how we're going to play trick takers or how we respond. It's like, no, well, actually the AI just responds in this completely non-human way.
The other thing that I probably should have mentioned with the spiritualists is it cannot follow. So that then you know that, okay, and there's only 4 suits, I think, 4 or 5 suits. So it's like, and you can see that the spirit has to play a particular card because it must not follow. And the reason why you have this spirit is because you are playing as spiritualists, and you're sort of conning the audience into, even though you're controlling the spirit, so you're and then each of them are alternating. It's like, no, I control the spirit. So it's like you're playing a con and
that's really funny.
Audience. Yeah. But yeah, so I always say this after talking about people whose games I've played tested, but please reach out to them. So if you're interested in playing Sarah's games, then she's more than happy to do that. She does have a physical copy, I think, of I Don't Like Onions that she's taken to different cons. So yeah, just hit her up, and I'm sure she'd love to play some games with you and do that. So yeah, it's really, really fun time doing that. Peter, is there a game that's out that you wanted to have a quick chat about, or anything?
Like I said, I've been playing so many prototypes lately. I'm trying to think of a few weeks ago at this point, a month ago, I got to play Paladins of the West Kingdom with my girlfriend.
Yes, I love that game so much.
I first encountered that at a board game convention up in Canada called Niagara Board Gaming Weekend that one of my friends helps run. And we played this, and I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. And the people at the table were like, yeah, it's like Oleon, but different. I'm like, I've actually never played Oleon. They're like, you've never played Oleon? So I played Paladins of the West Kingdom and then Oleon just back to back, literally one than the other. And I ended up picking up Paladins over Oleon, not because I think it's wildly better or anything like that, but just because I knew it had you could get it at the time. Oleon's been out of print for however long. And it was the first time I'd enjoyed and I think, I'm so glad he's doing what he's doing, but it's the first time I'd enjoyed a Garfield game, because I'd played Raiders of the North Sea and I'd played Architects of the West Kingdom, and I just hadn't stuck. And playing this one, I was like, oh, I get it now. So I was so delighted. So I only have a single, twice as many as I'm trying to think, like literal 4 shelves of games. That's all I let myself keep, and it's a one in, one out, except party games. I have a whole room of party games because I play with so many non-gamers. But in terms of gamer games, I have 4 shelves, and 2 of them are shelves of shame. So I cannot buy new games until I empty them. And so that one is one that's been on the shelves. I got it during lockdown, and I finally got to pull it out and play it, and I was so delighted. And my girlfriend's a production manager at Disney Animation. So she has the right brain for big, heavy, crunchy games. And so she loved it. So that was it's not a new game by any means, but that's the most recent published game that I played. And I was like, yep, this is staying on the shelf. I remember now why I bought this.
Yeah. So, oh man, I love that game. We do a top 10 at the end of every year. And I'm always
and it's always number one.
Yeah, wow. My number one changes a lot, which is weird, because it was a particular. We won't talk about that because Lauren will hate me.
No, we're both shills. They change all the time.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, whoever's gonna give me the most money, i.e., any money. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Paladins. And I quite liked Viscounts as well. That's
on the shelf of shame.
Yeah,
I got Paladins
very different.
I love Paladins so much that when he launched Viscounts, I backed it and added on Paladins. That's how I got Paladins, and haven't played it. So I know not to buy anymore until at least that one's off the shelf of shame. But,
Well, I'm big fans of their work, and they're sort of friends of the show. So that was so Lauren had Seasons of Rice and At the Helm by Button Shy. I talked about Sarah's upcoming games, I Don't Like Onions and Spiritualists, and that was also Paladins of the West Kingdom by Garfield Games.
Shem Phillips is the designer.
Shem, yep. Yeah, so Shem, and I don't know if Sam was on board for that one. I'd have to check with him. Yeah.
Oh, was he the third trilogy? I can't remember.
Yeah, he was. He did.
That reminded me too. Have you guys played Cat in the Box?
Yes.
Yes.
Divisive.
Oh, really? Between you two?
No. I quite like it, but there's been people I've talked to that despise it.
As we were talking about trick takers, I was thinking, like, if I was to make, like I said, I want to make something that's like adjacent, and that would be like that's in the right area of like, oh, it's a little weird, but it works. I think that game's brilliant. Anyway, that's all. I just wanted to ask if you played it.
No. I have. I think I didn't love the area control part of it as much.
Yeah, it feels a little. I have a philosophical thing about all creative media, so not just games, but like I like it when you have a seed and then everything grows out of that seed. And so either one or two seeds. And so the show Severance, which is currently airing, is driving me bonkers because I love the work-life balance premise and like tearing apart corporate America and like all that kind of stuff. And so like that seed, I think, was enough to grow a whole beautiful show that I would have loved. But then also there's like a culty thing that is just kind of off kill. It just doesn't work for me, and everyone else loves it. I realize I'm in the minority here, but like that's the kind of thing. And so Cat in the Box, I think like that premise of you don't know which one, blah, blah, I think that's amazing, and that could have carried a whole game. And then you're right. And then also there's an area control thing. It's like, okay, I see why that's there, but it's not central to the game. And so this relates back to what I was saying about like on writing well and trimming. Like I just want a very pure experience, and anything that's not that experience, I don't want to be there.
Yeah. I agree. The conceit of that game is excellent. I own a lot of Trick Takers. It's not one that I own, but I do think that there's a lot to really love about it.
Yeah. And then The Crew is the other one that I was really thinking of, is like it takes trick taking and just takes it in a whole other direction that is like,
and then the Lord of the Rings trick taking game has just come out.
I haven't played that yet.
Yeah.
That's
I gotta check
as
that
you
out.
were saying. Oh, what's the trick taker that's for everyone? The Fellowship of the Ring trick taking game might be the trick taking game for everyone. Yeah,
interesting.
It might just be.
Yeah.
It might just be.
The people who I've spoken to who have played it, they've played it with people who have never played trick takers.
Yeah,
and
it lands.
Yeah, because from what I'm understanding, and please, listeners, if I'm wrong, correct me. The person, I won't mention their name, but they know I'm talking about. They've said that it starts off really simple. It's almost like you have never heard of a trick taking game before, and then it ramps up and gets a lot harder, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm definitely keen to try that one. All right, we might get stuck into some news and announcements before we round out the show. So first, coming up, each of our game days in our 3 cities. So the Melbourne and Brisbane game days are on March 1st. Tickets and after game are up for that. So please, if you've bought your ticket, want to buy a ticket and want to sign up to after game, please do. So they're on March 1st. And then the Sydney Board Game Barbecue Day is on the 15th of March. Tickets are on sale for those events. Please head to Eventbrite to grab your tickets. And of course, coming up from the 11th to the 13th of July, our Christmas/Hanukkah is PlayCon. So very excited about that. Tickets are on sale. 3-day passes are running out quick. And just recently, the openings for Design Alley have gone live. So if you're interested in applying for a spot in Design Alley, please head to the PlayCon website and fix that up. That would be great. If you want to buy a ticket, want to buy a t-shirt, head to the website of www.play-con.com and head there. So like I said, 3-day tickets are running out fast, so really, really quick. Now is the time that we acknowledge our new patrons, if they're there, and I'm very proud to announce that our newest Patreon is former host of the show, Dan Harris. So Dan, of course, a founding member of the Board Game Barbecue who has left to go into greener pastures and pursue his own interests. We're very proud and happy for Dan to have done that. I could talk about Dan until the cows come home and how much he's helped me with this and stuff like that. So thanks for continuing to support us, Dan. you're an absolute legend, but you know that. Of course, if you do want to support our podcast, you can go to patreon.com/boardgamebarbecue and sign up to donate and get access to exclusive podcast episodes that we record just for you. We are endeavoring to have a far more regular output for our Patreon episodes, so hopefully you're enjoying the extra output. And we are going to have various events such as the Patreon dinner at PlayCon or catch up at PlayCon. We're going to have a Jackbox party pack coming up. We're going to have more trivia coming up. So please, if you want to participate in those, please join up and get access. But of course, if you are in no position to support us financially, there's plenty of other ways to support the podcast, including just telling your mates. Go on to Apple Podcasts and leave a star rating and a review for us, or use Spotify's star rating as well. Of course, you can join our Board Game Barbecue community by joining on Facebook, following us on X, Instagram, or YouTube, where we're uploading audio onto YouTube. And of course, I mention this every time, our fantastic Discord community. Thanks to the Discord community, I'm well into Dungeons and Dragons now. My friends think it's the funniest thing ever. And I don't care because I'm having an absolute blast. So all those things are being run on Discord, our Jackbox party packs. I have met friends for life on our Discord, including, Lauren as well, who was part of our community before she became a host. So it's a fantastic place. If you're looking for people to play games with, there's also a BGA channel and all that type of stuff. So all the links are in our show notes. So at this point, Peter, we mentioned something that's got us fired up. It could be a board game that's coming out. It could be something board game related, but it doesn't have to be something in your life that you're happy about. As I said before, we have the Melbourne Board Game Barbecue Day. I'm so excited. We haven't had one for a little while because we had PAX that we all went to, and then it became busy Christmas period and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to see some of my friends, new people that I've met that are keen to come, people we've met through PlayCon and PAX. So it's going to be an awesome
Probably worth
time.
mentioning, it is a strict bring your own paper bag system. So don't expect them to be at the door. Don't expect a little dispenser. It's not how it's run. You must bring your own. It's a hygiene thing.
Yeah. In this post-COVID society, I'm sorry we can't share face bags. So I'm excited about that, especially now that our after game's gone up. There's games that are being put on there, and I'm super excited. Lauren, what are you excited about?
Look, to bring this full circle, it all started with Peter trying to impress a boy and to get into games. And I started drinking tea to try and impress a girl. The game that I just got in, which is a little button shy game that just
I know what this one
is a nice cuppa. And I just got a nice cuppa along with The Last Lighthouse. Both are Scott Arms solo games. So I'm really excited to get them to the table and have a spot of tea along the way. So haven't looked too much into the rules or how they play, but yeah, very keen to give those a go.
Okay, in spirit with my talking too much, I'm going to give 3 answers, but I'll try to give pretty quick. So I just got a button shy package. I just got the sequel to Circle the Wagons, Circle the Wagons Second Shot, which I am, as mentioned, I think it's my favorite micro game, my favorite 18 card game of all time. So I'm really excited to see what that team has come up with next. I was going to be all fired up about a place for all my books currently on Kickstarter, which is designed by my frequent collaborator, Alex Cutler, who worked with me on Critter Kitchen and that 3-hour Euro that I was talking about, and the Bleeped game. Like, those are all with Alex. This is a game he's working with another designer, like the cheating man that he is. But it's just been going really well. Brandon Sanderson just backed it, so he's like made his it's going to be great. The reason I'm not mentioning that one is because this podcast comes out in a few weeks, by which time the Kickstarter will be done. But go check it out. Check out Late Pledges. It's going to be so cool. Kurt has done the publisher has done an amazing job with all the bits. It's just like phenomenal. And then the third and final answer I'll give is that you mentioned my YouTube channel earlier. I've been working for an embarrassingly long time now on a trilogy of video essays about Ted Lasso. And I am so close to the first one being ready that I can taste it. And so I would like to say by the time this episode comes out, realistically, it's not going to be, but like at some point in the next 25 years, the first of my videos will come out, and I am so pumped for it. It's called Ted Lasso Season 1 is Perfect. And it's a 20-30 minute video essay about that first season.
If it is out, we will link it in the show notes.
Yeah. If not, link to my YouTube channel and they can subscribe and get notified when it comes out. Hit that bell.
And then check it. Yeah, hit that bell. And they can check out all your little freeze frames of
Yeah,
Easter
those are
eggs.
fun.
They're fun. Yeah, it was really good. Hey, Pete, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for giving up your time. It's been an absolute blast talking to you. We love talking to designers and all that gear. Like, it's so much fun. You've got such great insights on game design. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. If you want to hear me talking more about game design, if somehow this hasn't scared you off, the podcast is releasing weekly at this point. It's a video podcast on YouTube. It's also an audio podcast, and we're just like, we've got such a lovely community. We're having so much fun making it. So every week we're putting out a new episode about game design and game design philosophy and weird little models and how stuff fits together.
That's awesome. Yeah. So
good.
So where can people find you? You've got your website, peterchayward.com as well, so people can go to that.
Beard.blue is probably the easiest way to find me.
Beard.blue, yep. Okay,
Yep.
so that we'll put all your links in the show notes as well. And looking forward to seeing some of those games come out, including Redacted Project.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, thanks so much, mate. It's been an absolute blast. People in our community have loved your games, and we're just keen to see what comes next.
Yeah. And Lauren, I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
All right, mate, let's get keen.
All right. As per usual, and again, thank you to you, our listeners, and our patrons. Without you guys, we couldn't do this show. So thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Actually, I'm going to
Connor, put your shirt back on. This has gone off the rails.
You can't shackle us, Peter. You can't shackle us.
This is why people listen.